Welcome again to another episode of Trace and Tell with Joe and Ade. It's nice to have you guys back on episode 3 of our podcast where we discuss everything related to crypto incidents, crimes, and just talking about all of these things in very simple, non-technical way where we can actually make people start talking about it within the ecosystem where conversations can be had rather. So yeah, welcome again. And today we have three different topics to discuss, and I think one of them is actually from what where we stopped last week, which is your one. uh we've noticed a bit of update regarding some of the reports that some of the industry leaders have put out regarding the service itself, and we're going to be talking about Phylax. Jay is going to be talking about that a lot. He was at the Berlin crypto conference. I believe that is what it's called. Just this last week, and yeah, he's going to be sharing a lot on that. And then lastly, we'll be ending this episode with our story of the week, which is on Cork Protocol and their incidents, which is like an exploit basically. So nice. And so, just starting off with where we stopped last time, which is HuionePay. And if you haven't checked our last episode, you should probably have it on Spotify and YouTube right now. So you can quickly go over there and then check the episode 2 where we discussed HuionePay, what they do, how they do it, and why we're actually discussing them. But we have a bit of update on it today, and I would ask Joe to give us a bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So Q1, which we caught, or yeah, like you mentioned, we talked about last week, was a major, or still is a major cryptocurrency firm doing a lot of money laundering, organized crime, pig butchering scams, facilitating a lot of it through Telegram channels,
Hmm.
um, and other sort of anonymous or pseudo-anonymous like tools.
Yeah.
And the FinCEN from the US designated them as a criminal network and not to do business with them. And we were questioning it last week whether or not that would have much of an effect on them
Hmm.
due to the nature of their business or location in Southeast Asia, I think specifically Cambodia,
Yeah.
the Chinese language that they're focused on. And there's been reports over the last week. I think Chain Analysis did a great job on doing one that our inclination of them being unable to operate anymore was correct. In fact, according to this article from Chain Analysis, they believe who one's facilities have actually increased
Mm.
in the amount of money they've laundered. For example, it's shown that daily volumes went up from 125 million up to 145 million.
Yeah. That's a
Just
lot.
as one example, yeah, they're still processing billions of dollars in transactions, much of which is dirty money
Yeah.
from the sort of scams that they help fund, etc. So yeah, certainly not a good thing. A few weeks ago, it was all kind of positive oriented news that FinCEN finally designated who won as a criminal organization. But this really shines to light how difficult it is to enforce these
Yeah.
actions. Yeah, I mean, especially with a place like Cambodia, organization like Hue One, I think a lot of people expected that they had already sort of defended their organization from such
Hmm.
actions, sort of having other entities already established,
Yeah.
a network of money being able to be pushed to different networks when this sort of thing happened. A little bit like, reminds me when Russia invaded Ukraine. Some people are like, oh, we're going to get them with sanctions and the
Yeah.
SWIFT network and all this thing. But it turns out that, they were to some degree somewhat prepared. And,
Yeah.
they've been kind of building their own SWIFT network to some degree with some of the other countries that they're.
True.
Anyways, kind of sort of reminds me of this a little bit. But Yeah, the main point of bringing Q1 back is to show that enforcing these actions really is difficult and
Yeah,
takes a unified effort from regulators and authorities all around the world.
yeah,
And yeah, basically, I think people who want to fight financial crime need to get people in this region of the world on their side and collaborate with them and create relationships and build apparatus to help enforce these actions. So, a lot of work to be done in
yeah.
this domain.
I
Yeah.
think when just as it's, when you're talking now, I think a couple of things just um came into my mind. And yes, there is obviously, I and it's also part of what we discussed last week. There is the aspect of what regulators and government can do, and then there is obviously going to be the part where the technology firms and solutions would have to play. Now, yeah, maybe Finson reached out to Telegram to take down some of those channels that HuionePay was operating with, but it's also the way the technology itself is being set up. Anybody can actually create any channel any part of the world, and the fact that all you need is like a phone number, and at some point you can even buy like a Telegram phone number which is not linked to any country, right? So it doesn't take them anything to sort of like spring up a different channel altogether in the same day when one is being taken down. Yeah, it might take them a bit of like a second to tell their peer-to-peer buyers and sellers that like, oh, this channel is no more active, so go back to this channel or things of that nature. So I don't know. I think it's going to take a bit of cooperative effort, as you said, right? And also, like we mentioned last time, also the governments or the regional government, so to speak, or the countries in which these particular entities or services are domiciled, would also need to take a bit of actions around like how they actually um allow these guys to operate within their ecosystem. Because I remember after we discussed this last week, it prompted I was thinking about it that also there was something like this that happened in Estonia when Estonia was sort of like seen as like the gateway for Russians to actually launder money, or yeah, get money from their countries into Western Europe or even like to the Western world generally. And then one thing Estonia did was, and majority of it was actually through crypto. And one thing they did
Mhm.
was they put up a very stringent regulatory requirements for any crypto company to operate, such that like I think the number of the entities, crypto entities in Estonia reduced by 90% because it was very hard for them to actually get that regulatory clearance before they can actually operate. So I think yeah, it's also something as much as like FinCEN or US government is doing one thing, trying to put in some certain controls, the government of the day in terms of where that particular service is domiciled also would need to take a very similar action to ensure these things are being dealt with or mitigated in the right way. So yeah, well, I think we will definitely keep an eye on this you won't pay thing because, and I think there is a part of that article, or maybe something else from Elliptic Dimension. It is not just only you won't pay. There are other players that are very similar to you won't pay. So it's
Exactly.
yeah, it's a case of what they call it. This animal that when you cut one head, it's sprout out like four, five other heads. I can't remember,
Yeah.
but yeah. Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, you wanted to add something to that?
No, no, no. Just like a case of whack-a-mole or something. Some
Yeah,
people say, but yeah, it's something to keep an eye out. And yeah, I think the whole compliance and financial crime industry needs has a big challenge there. So it'll be
yes,
interesting to see how it develops. Yeah.
true, true. And we mentioned at the beginning of this episode, Joe was at Berlin Blockchain. Please correct me if I'm actually messing up the name of the conference. I think it's Berlin Blockchain Week or Berlin Blockchain Conference Week. And
That's correct.
you had the opportunity of being part of different presentations by different companies and products on what they are doing to make this space safer. And I think on your LinkedIn page, you actually posted some of these things. So yeah, if you want to check some of them, please go to his LinkedIn page. You'll be able to see some of those things that which he has posted there regarding the conference. But yeah, I think we wanted to talk more on one specific product, and I think it's called Phylax Protocol, I believe. So yeah, please give us more on what Phylax Protocol is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just to confirm, I'm currently been going to Berlin Blockchain Week, or it's actually weeks. It's like 2 weeks and a
Wow.
bunch of different events going on. Yeah, really good blockchain ecosystem here in Berlin, and they do this once a year since like 2018, I believe. And yeah, I was at a conference called Protocol Berg. It's funded by
Hmm.
Ethereum heavy NGO or like nonprofit type of organization called the
Okay.
Department of Decentralization. And yeah,
Nice name.
su- yeah, exactly. Really cool conference. A lot of like on-chain type folks. Yeah, not much of like a LinkedIn crowd or anything like this, but
Mm-hmm.
very technical, in the weeds, a lot of developers, and really a lot of pioneers for the industry, at least the smart contract protocol, Ethereum type of world. Actually got to see Vitalik Buterin for the first time give a
Nice.
presentation. Yeah, yeah. So, anyways, yeah, really cool conference and some really interesting progressive presentations that you won't find in too many spots. So here's a bit of a alpha and maybe a little leak before this maybe goes mainstream because I do think it's quite powerful. And yeah, it's called Phylax. I believe we're pronouncing that correctly. Phylax protocol, or what they've built called a credible layer.
Hmm.
They just released their white paper back in the fall in October, and long story short, what this does, it can potentially revert hacks or malicious transactions before they're finalized.
Hmm.
And this is obviously a very powerful tool or setup for Web3 security and, minimizing exploits and hacks before they're finalized. And this is it's called credible layer because it's, as you can think of, a layer between that potential protocol or
Yeah.
DeFi application and then the end user or hacker or receiving wallet
Yeah.
that would get those hacked funds to some degree. It would be a layer between the two. So this isn't preventing malicious hacks at the contract level and within the code. It's actually allowing them to happen
Yeah.
for the transaction to be processed, and they would go to what's called a extended runtime environment.
Mm-hmm.
And this credible layer will be there in this extended runtime environment, and it can decide whether or not this is a malicious or non-malicious transaction. And if it is, it will revert the transaction.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, really, really cool. I mean, that's just real high level, and even for me to understand all the technical details, I'm not 100% clear on. You definitely need to read deeper into it.
Mm.
But in theory, this is how it works. There are obviously some limitations to it and some fallbacks. But yeah, I mean, hopefully I'm not getting too technical here.
Yeah.
This is just, yeah, good because I don't even know if I fully could myself. But um, yeah, maybe like some of the limitations that the big ones that come to mind is specifically for the moment, it's really designed for layer twos.
Mm, okay.
This is due to the fact that it needs to associate with the sequencers that layer twos work with. Um, yeah, I think because if I'm not mistaken, yeah, it's just the way like the rollups work.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
they, they need to integrate with this sequencer. So really, with any applications that are built on like optimism
Yeah.
base things like this, They are working on ways to potentially get it to work on the layer one with Ethereum, but that would definitely be a much bigger engineering hurdle. Um, Fun fact: one of the talks at the conference was the one that Vitalik Buterin gave was
Yeah.
about upgrading the EVM to one of the ZK
Wow.
EVMs, yeah, yeah, potentially maybe the Risk 5 one. If you don't know what that is, it's all right, but maybe look up what Risk 5 is. That's
Mm.
probably something you'll hear more about. So I was thinking maybe there's potential down the road when the EVM potentially, and it sounds like it will probably be upgraded to a ZK EVM. That could be a moment for maybe something like this to be implemented at the
Wow.
layer one level. Um, so anyways, this is really powerful, really, it's kind of funny when you're just kind of casually listening to these guys give presentations on it. And I think it clicked with some people in the room. And then, I don't know, it's hard to judge the room and how much
Yeah.
enthusiasm's coming from people. But it sounded like quite a revolutionary and profound thing. And it was just kind of like casually discussed, which is kind of funny to me a little bit.
Interesting.
Um, but yeah, I mean, we can go on and on about
Yeah.
it, but yeah.
I think I have a couple of questions on them on that because like I was actually going through the white paper also, and I think from the look of things, there's going to be like a set of rules which they call like assertions, which is like,
Yep.
or based on
Hmm.
this set of rules, if the transaction or that logic is not meeting this rule, then it shouldn't be processed, or it should raise something and then throw a certain response, and maybe either make the transaction go through or kind of like revert the transaction as you said, right? So I think there is that set of rules involved, and then there is a bunch of smart contracts play in there, and then there is the off-chain, and then transferring that from the off-chain through Oracle to on-chain. It to me, I think it's really nice. But I think one thing which sort of like jumps out of it, right, as I was reading, was like this is solely, at least for now, kind of like built towards logic-based exploits, the smart contract exploits and the likes, like, or what exactly is this logic meant to do and how is it doing it, and then how people exploit those sort of logics, right? But not necessarily targeting things like social engineering or I don't know, any type of like exploit that exists within the space where businesses will lose funds and the likes, right? Because so that is one thing that kind of like quickly jumps out of that white paper, and I think it's nice, but I kind of feel like the dependencies are quite a lot, in my opinion. Uh, and again, like the space is still very, very, very new. There is the mention of ZK protocol or ZK logic rather to sort of like understand or to prove if a certain transaction is true or false and all of those things. Like ZK in itself, as far as I'm concerned, is not fully built yet. I was reading something last
Almost.
yeah last
Mhm.
week that Polygon are actually sort of like closing their ZK protocol solution and to focus on something else, right? Which for it could be for reasons of like, oh, it's not selling as much as they want it, or it's not being used as much as they want it. And it could basically be like a business decision, to be honest, right? Maybe not a technical one, right? But I think that was one thing which I that jumped out of the Phylax white paper. But I think there's a question which I want to ask you, right? Because I actually also noticed they mentioned something around having a governance token as part of it's there optionally. It's like they may or they may not. But like what's your take on I'll tell you what my take is. My take on governance token, in my own opinion, is sort of like you're sort of like giving people an opportunity to kind of like um find ways around it's kind of like a game theory thing, and people always find a ways to exploit a game theory, in my opinion, right? So you're sort of like giving people that opportunity, but like, yeah, what's your take on this?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to answer a few of those, the governance thing, I'm honestly don't have much of a comment on. They didn't really speak much about it at the conference, and I'm sure, yeah, I don't know much how that would influence the protocol or what could happen. I don't know if that's designed for the people upholding the runtime environment
Mm-hmm.
or um, the other sort of incentive structure
Yeah.
that's put in there to uphold these assertions. That's probably something I need to look more into. It is, I mean, you do kind of touch on in regards to upholding the economic security of it. It does sound like that could be a bit of a concern,
Mm.
and like how decentralized it is. And yeah, like how can you make sure it doesn't get compromised?
Yeah.
Because apparently there's like a structure potentially you could bribe like a sequencer to some
Yeah.
degree, things like this. So that's certainly a big risk or something they need to work on and figure out.
Yeah.
Um, there was something I wanted to say though. I mean, regarding ZK
Mm-hmm.
and ZK EVMs, like they definitely. You mentioned Polygon was shutting down. Is that what you said? That
Yeah.
you heard?
Polygon network.
Or
Yeah. Or Polygon Labs.
well,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, actually, I did hear from the guy, his name's Jordy, I think it is, from Polygon Labs, who's working on that, and it sounded like they're very much still uh, working on it, but I think they may have migrated their technology more to like the Risk 5 setup, which is from the Risk Zero team. There is around like 20 to 25 ZK EVMs being worked on right now, and it does
Yeah.
sound like the Risk Zero team is really leading the pack, and maybe that's what the
They're
information you
switching
saw
to.
was regarding to. But they're very much working on this. I can tell you there because I went to another meeting or conference last Tuesday that was specific to ZK EVMs,
Mm.
and yeah, they have like 100x the throughput on them just in the last like since March or something or since the beginning of the year, and they are really moving fast and doing some pretty incredible things. Honestly, that's something that should be probably like publicized and discussed more is how quickly the ZK EVMs are moving and the throughput they're going to bring to the Ethereum layer one and
Mm.
it's quite a big deal. It's sort of just like kind of like casually is happening in the background, and not too many people are
Yeah.
talking about it. But nonetheless, this is really amazing stuff, and um, that's what I wanted to say on that. And regarding Phylax, I think there was something else I want to say. Oh, yeah. So if this is just logic oriented, reverting on a potential malicious
Mm-hmm.
transactions, yes, it's not necessarily great for specific social engineering things, but you could put like rules in place or assertions in place of like only X% of some wallet could be, transact at some moment,
Yeah.
or at a certain time, or making sure that certain signers on a multi-sig have to like review something to just double and triple check that it is a secure transaction. You can assert these sort of social engineered components into it, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. And it could, like, for example, it could have stopped potentially Bybit hack. You could have done something pretty easily saying, you know, not, $1 billion should definitely not be leaving this wallet, or I forget the exact metrics on what wallets had exactly what amounts, but you could certainly put some sort of assertion or logic based security on a situation like that and prevent that. So, I mean, when you hear about something that could have prevented the biggest hack ever, not just in blockchain, but probably ever at 1.5 billion that is now going
Yeah.
towards North Korea, like people should listen and ears perk up. And I think that's why this is really interesting. And of course, a lot of work needs to be done. It's still, I think, in really like early stages. But yeah, I thought it was pretty exciting, and hopefully people out there do too. So.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think it's something we would obviously discuss. We'll keep an eye on this one too. I think generally the space needs more than what we currently have. In terms of how we secure assets in this space. Some of them comes from some of them will be technical solutions like Phylax, some of them will be just awareness. Some of them would be just having better UI, to be honest, right? So I think they come in different phases, and I think Phylax is also doing something interesting in that aspect. So yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye out on this, and then once we get more, we'll come back here and share that with you guys. Welcome back. And like we mentioned earlier on, we are starting something called the story of the week, where we'll pick a random incident within the ecosystem from any sort of typology. Could be scams, phishing, whatnots, exploits, social engineering, smart contract exploits, and the likes. And then we'll narrate the story and discuss what could have been done better, if there is anything that could have been done better, or if it's just like one of those 0 day attacks that's are very prevalent nowadays. So today, our first story of the week, at least for this particular podcast, is a discussion on Cork Protocol, CORK Protocol. And yeah, Joe, please take it over.
Yeah, so Cork Protocol, honestly, never really had heard much about them before, but they had a $12 million exploit, and it seems that this was highly preventable. And it sort of, yeah, it highlights that protocols and DeFi protocols specifically and smart contracts are still being hacked for very non-novel bugs and attack vectors. And yeah, it just brings to light that we really still need to work on just a lot of foundational security measures when it comes to DeFi protocols and smart contracts. To give a little more context on it, so Cork Protocol is a DeFi protocol built to manage and tokenize risk, which makes it a little bit ironic that they were attacked and hacked.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it sort of highlights that they didn't really have great risk management. This was a protocol as well that was following a lot of the industry recommendations of going
Hmm.
through different audits and
Yeah.
code contests, but even these did not make sure that the contract was safe. And honestly, the exploit, I don't want to go like super into detail, but a lot of it was basically, yeah, it was basically a like validation error. The
Mm.
attacker created a malicious contract, I believe, and was able to exploit the contract via a very standard, well-known type of bug. Yeah, I mean, am newish to smart contract auditing and just been working on it for a little while, but even I should have been able to prevented this bug. I mean, easy to say now, but yeah, it's really a basic thing, and I think protocols, their engineering teams, the auditing space, the security space, teams and firms who are working more on the preemptive, what's the right word, pre hack or pre exploit
Hmm.
side of things, prevention, that there still needs to be a lot of focus on the foundational things. I think probably a lot of auditors and contests and bug bounties are really running down like deep rabbit holes and deep um, branches on a tree, they call them sometimes, to try to find something really novel where, I think there's still a lot of value for auditors to look at just simple foundational things like access control and re-intercede type of attacks and things like
Hmm.
that. So Cork Protocol is not the only one. There's been other ones just in the last few weeks. Um, CETIS, if I'm pronouncing CETIS protocol, which was
Yeah.
compromised for $223 million. There was another one called ImpairMax for over 300,000. And the bugs and attack vectors that allow these to be exploited were really uh, common things that people should know and they should not have happened. So, yeah, the news there is just it's 2025. Some people think the space has really evolved and buttoned up a lot of the security issues, but the reality is that there are very common things still persistent, and yeah, security professionals should be aware of it. So,
Well, I agree with what you said actually, because like I don't think sort of like having a logo on a stamp on your side that says our contract has been audited is yeah. Some guys would even go as far as just using AI to audit their contract at this point, right? And
mhm.
I think it's more than that right now. A bunch of just having kind of like basic obsec around just Web2, not institutionalizing Web2 security protocols sometimes might even save some of these guys from some of these issues, right? Because like, yeah, it's I don't know how I feel about it. It's just something that is happening, and that doesn't mean it's not going to happen tomorrow. I'm very sure something else will pop up tomorrow, and then we'll be like, oh, well, I think this shouldn't have happened because, yeah, we should have known better. But yeah, it is what it is. So yeah, I think that's interesting, and uh, we'll also monitor corporate incidents as it goes. And I think right now, what the stage they are now is trying to get the asset back. Hopefully they do. And I think on the investigation side also, we'll be able to sort of like see a bit more around who is actually involved. If it's like a state actor or maybe just random guys that understands how the logic worked and then they exploited that. So I think those ones will come out fairly soon. So yeah, I think that's about what we can take today. And I'll give it over to Joe.
Yeah, I mean, thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully, our topics today sparked some ideas and shown that Web3 security professionals, there's never a dull day, and there's plenty of work to do. So, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.